Welcome to the SuperFast Podcast, the place for information on healthy living, fasting, superfasting, diet and nutrition, and exercise. I'm your host, M. David Peterson, the author of the ebook SuperFast, Fasting for Super Health, and founder of SuperFast Superfit. Also joining us today is our co-host, Mr. Bruce MacGregor. Bruce has been fasting with us for several months, and he brings a fresh perspective to our discussions about superfasting. We both bring experience and science together for a comprehensive conversation on all things fasting, diet, and exercise. Please note that nothing on this podcast is meant as medical advice. We present our opinions based on experience and science for educational and entertainment purposes only. For any lifestyle change, consult your healthcare professional and never stop taking your medication without a doctor's approval. Now, let's get on with the SuperFast Podcast. Welcome to the SuperFast Podcast. I'm M. David Peterson. My partner here is Bruce MacGregor, and we are going to talk about fasting, super fasting, when we can. Today, we are going to talk about a study that looked at fasting and calorie restriction, and what they found out about that. And then we're going to look at an article on that, which most people would read, and we're going to look at the study on that. And then we are going to talk about the differences between fasting and caloric restriction, and why fasting is better.
We're looking at an article called, the headline is, "Eating Less Can Lead to a Longer Life. Massive Study in Mice Shows Why." It shows why.
Yeah, well, I like the fact that the title is Eating Less. So we're looking at calorie restriction at this point. If the title doesn't give it away, which I think it does, they're going to show that calorie restriction is better than any other dietary intervention.
Okay. All right. And where did the article come from?
Oh, well, this is Nature, nature.com. So
is this Nature too?
Yeah, they're both from Nature. So the study was
an article on the study, and then there's the study.
Then the study, which was all published in nature.com.
Okay.
So, and most people believe that Nature is a reputable.
They have a reputation with me, that's for sure.
Well, there you go. You can tell us all about that.
But I definitely still respect the British Medical Journal. Well, it's not like they're preaching the gospel or anything. That they'll have their duds, but I think that they've made a few ethical decisions. So.
Well, we can certainly talk about nutritional studies and how much of it you should believe, but we're going to rip this one apart because I want to look at the language. So they're talking about weight loss, and they're talking about severe dietary restrictions.
Starvation, really. It's not pushing into starvation.
Absolutely. And that's why they're saying severe. And so you automatically, the reader is already starting to say, oh, well, if whatever they're saying is the best is okay, the rest are all too severe. I mean, I'm going to die from them. So, they also talk about, as far as fasting, they go diet or people who are subjected to regular bouts of fasting. Yeah, what's a bout? A bout is a fight. Do you feel like you're fighting when you're fasting? I mean, do you feel? No. And you also, as
subjected? Where do they say subjected?
Subjected, right here. Subjected to regular bouts of fasting. It's negative language for the fasting, whereas they say the study involved how many ever mice fed low-calorie diets. That sounds so wonderful.
Subjected. I'm offended by that.
Well,
So-
you are being subjected, I guess, to fasting.
I think I'm being subjected to propaganda here, but
Here,
I think you're
absolutely.
you're exposing the language first. So
Yeah.
that's always, that's always red flags. You're looking at the language that's used.
Yes. And I just want to point out two more because they talk about intermittent fasting, which involves short bouts. So we're talking about fights again, and food deprivation. But it also increases longevity. But you're fighting and you're depriving yourself of food. And
What if you like to fun? It's no big deal then.
I guess not.
So where's this other line you're talking about?
The short bouts and the deprivation is now.
Short bouts and deprivation.
Yeah, food deprivation, which is what intermittent fasting is.
So they define it as intermittent fasting, which involves short bouts of food deprivation. Yeah, big 16 hours for me.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I go 16 hours and I eat for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And I stuff my face.
You're doing, and they talk about that in the study also about one of the negatives of fasting is the mice are searching for food which shows that they're hungry. But we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so that's all I want to say about language. I mean, the whole point of this is to show that calorie restriction is better than fasting. So let's look a little bit more about it. What do you got there, Bruce?
What I keyed into was it's not so much the language, but I found I key into metabolic changes right away.
Okay.
Because I'm worried about my metabolism. I've had a problem with my metabolic level since my mid-20s. I've been on medication for it since my mid-20s, and it's worked so well that I still take it. After like 25, now it's 30 years of taking it. So whenever you say the magic word metabolism, it gets my attention. And they raise that again and again.
But do they ever tell you what those metabolic changes are?
They say they're important, and they say, but they don't lead to lifespan extension. But they don't tell you if you're increasing someone, but it's implied. It's implied because when you dig in deeper, not to the article, but into the study, they do talk about, it's a reduction in your level of metabolism because you're increasing fat, right? That's not going to increase it's not going to increase your metabolism.
All right, you're talking about something in the article.
Because you need it to begin to make sense of this.
Well, they do talk about it. Cutting calories, we'll go with that.
All right.
Second paragraph. Cutting calorie intake can lead to a leaner body and a longer life. And then it says, now one of the biggest studies of dietary restrictions ever conducted in laboratory animals challenges the conventional wisdom about how dietary restriction boosts longevity. And so then they go down here to this, the fourth paragraph here. The metabolic changes are important, but they don't lead to lifespan extension. It's what this is saying is, and so far, is that the metabolic changes that come with fasting and calorie restriction, for that matter, don't matter. They have no effect on the length of your life. So why bother? I mean, really. But let's go on. They actually did tell who funded this. Calico Life Sciences. So we're going to look into that. It's in South San Francisco, California. It's an anti-aging focused biotech company that funded this study. So they did talk about the funding in the article, which is fantastic. But let's go further. And you have to read the study because they really don't say how the study is set up in this article, which is kind of annoying. If you really want to know about if you just want to know about the findings, then it tells you here on the second page.
Take with a grain of salt if you don't know how a study is structured.
Yeah, exactly. So what they say is cutting calories by 40% yielded the longest longevity bump.
I'm not going to reduce my calories by 40%.
Well, we figured out.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, we figured out before the show that with a 2,500 calorie intake, which is if you are exercising, which you should exercise, and eating correctly, it's difficult to get that many calories in, but this is what the body needs. And if you reduce that by 40%, you are looking at about 1,500 calories.
Yeah.
Which is a starvation diet. We can talk about the Minnesota starvation study that was feeding them 1,600 calories a day, 16 to 18.
So how many Big Macs is that? 1,500 calories?
That's probably
two,
maybe. Yeah,
two Big Macs. So they gave the mice 2 Big Macs.
Pretty much.
I haven't had a Big Mac in a long time, but I can only imagine I'd feel starving after it. Yeah, I'd feel really hungry.
Yeah.
So, but also that's another side of this is they're not saying what's the quality of the food that these critters are getting, right?
They do in the study, but this article doesn't. And you can just mouse chow is basically what they're giving them, mice chow.
So do I have to eat mice chow and reduce it by 40%?
Pretty much, but I think they
sign me up.
I think they simulate the American diet pretty well with the food that they get. They put sugar, salt, and oil in it.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds very sad.
So it's not the healthiest food for the mice, but
so it's disgusting food that they're given anyway.
But it tastes good. Disgusting food that tastes good. That's what it's going to be.
That's another reason. Another factor that plays in this. I guess if it's consistent across the board, it's a factor, but it's a controlled factor of the study.
Yeah.
But intermittent fasting, I don't know how anyone could do it on garbage food. Even like when you reduce it to the level of I know this will just bother you, it's an oxymoron, but if you have a healthy hamburger, like you're actually using quality ground beef and you have some fruit and you have like vegetables that are good quality and etc., right? You're going to feel very hungry, during your fasting period after eating that. It's going to be a struggle to make it through the fasting period because the food is not substantial enough.
Yeah, we do have some. I call the when we eat unhealthy because we have a splurge day. I call those the bouts. Because we're having a bout with this bad food, yeah. But it's been longer for me. I mean, it's relatively just a couple of months for you when you when you were not eating very healthy, then you started fasting and you kept the same diet. But then over just a couple of months, you changed your diet. How has that worked?
I mean, you have to, and also like for me, my big cheat is in the mornings, I eat fruit. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing that I'm probably getting my actual nutrition, into my body at about the same time. So I was pretty light for breakfast in the morning anyway. I'd have 2 eggs, mm-hmm. Right? And it's probably being maybe I was getting energy from that by 11.
Right.
I take the fruit. I'm at 10. I'm probably getting my energy by 11. I don't know.
Maybe even sooner. That's about a half an hour.
Half an hour. So I'm actually this whole idea of being deprived. I'm not being deprived. I'm getting extra time in the morning to exercise from the experience of intermittent fasting. And one of the big things is feeling like you have to give something up. You have to give up 1,000 calories a day. Yeah, it's this term of food deprivation that I object to because you're really not being deprived of nutrition. If you manage your calories right. Now, if you're used to biscuits in the morning, otherwise known as cereal, you want to eat like cookies for breakfast, that's what cereal is. Maybe you're getting fast sugar from that. I never spend decades since I've had cereal. So I was my pieces were in place for this to start this productively.
Yeah. Well, and my argument is this, that calorie restriction is a starvation diet, whereas fasting is not, because if you get the right amount of nutrition, you can eat. They were saying something about with intermittent fasting, we get about 25 to 35% fewer calories. But if we make up that with nutrition, and this is one of the reasons why
Are you sure on that? I don't think I'm taking in fewer calories.
Well, the longer it needs to be.
Well, if you're doing like the 48-hour ones,
if you're eating 8 hours every day, then you're going to be pretty close to the amount of calories. And of course, they would say that we're definitely being subjected to severe regular bouts. When we go for severe subjected to regular bout, we go for 30 plus hours 3 times a week. So that's like 90 plus hours of fasting per week where we're going without food. But it doesn't feel like we're depriving ourselves, because the next day we can eat as much and as often as we want, and whatever we want, although we save the splurges until Saturday, which is our splurge day. And like you said, we want healthy food, and as long as we're getting the nutrition, then there's no problem with it. But they want us to believe that if we starve ourselves, if we do these severe dietary restrictions with as far as fasting and that goes, that we are not going to get the nutrition. And my blood work this last time, they looked for all the major minerals and all the major vitamins, and I wasn't low in anything. As a matter of fact, vitamin D, which is very important for cancer and other things to keep you from getting skin cancer and this kind of stuff, I'm at 180, my blood level, and 125 is fine. That's normal if it's around 125. So I've got extra. Where most people would think, well, 3 days a week of fasting, my God, you must be starving yourself. And, I don't think I look like I'm starving, but.
No, you're not.
Anyway, so
I would interject, go ahead, because I'm doing intermittent fasting, which is 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of chowing down. And I think I've increased my calorie intake, because I would have these 2 crummy eggs in the morning. I think but now I have a lot of fruit. A lot.
Well, you were probably, if you had 2 eggs in the morning, that's calorie restriction right there. You were restricting your calorie. And that wasn't working out for you, which is what they find with calories.
Yeah, it's all the other stuff that I wasn't having. I wasn't having toast. I wasn't having jam. I wasn't having butter. What else? It's all all those little goodies. But I went from 2 eggs to that much fruit.
Yeah.
And that, there is sugar in it. I actually believe that I've increased the number of calories I take in. And we were talking earlier about Muslims during Ramadan, that there's food inflation in Saudi Arabia because so much food's being purchased. One of the reasons is they're buying food for the poor. But the other reason is I think they're basically doing a form of intermittent fasting. And
Ramadan is definitely intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
I asked one of my...
Chowing down.
Yeah.
When it's they're having, it's feast and fast. It's feast and fast.
Absolutely. And when they feast, they feast. So I asked one of my friends who was doing Ramadan if she lost weight during Ramadan. She said, no, I gained weight.
Yeah, that's so understandable.
And we don't advocate for dry fasting, which is what they do on Ramadan. But
yeah, it's a dry place, Saudi Arabia.
Yes, and dry fasting, absolutely. Maybe that's why they do that. Anyway, let's get back to the calorie restriction. The 40% calorie restriction yielded the longest longevity. So the mice that were on the calorie restricted, 40%, they lived longer than so there were, if we look at the study, there were 5 categories. One, ad libitum, which means they could eat whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. And then they had they had a 1-day intermittent fast, a 2-day intermittent fast, and then a 20% calorie restriction and a 40% calorie restriction. So those are the 5 categories. And they're saying that 40% calorie restriction was they lived the longest.
If you're a human, you probably wouldn't want to live longer on that diet.
It would be tough. 40% every day.
Calories. What would you eat?
Well, there's a guy, and he just
I guess wouldn't be able to get it.
He just died. He was the 5'2" guy.
5'2"?
5'2", and he took a vaccine, and that's I've read that, and so he died of natural causes suddenly at quite a young age. When he's doing this fasting. He was around, I want to say around 60. He really wasn't very old. At any rate, he basically, the 5-2 diet, they can do the 2 days of fasting. They can eat 500 calories to 600 calories, and that's really not a fasting. That's calorie restricted all the way along, because they can eat whatever they want on the 5 days, but then they have this 500 or 600 calories on the fasting days.
It's not a fasting day.
It's not a fasting day
because you've activated your digestive system.
But he also, now he was a doctor. He never practiced as a doctor, but he got the education of a doctor, and he wrote a book that he advocated 800 calories every day. 800 calories. That's one Big Mac. And that's it. For the rest of the day, you can't drink soda, you can't eat potato chips, you can't eat French fries, no milkshakes, just one Big Mac, and that's it for the day. And that is a starvation diet. You are going to end up injuring yourself if you do that.
Why on earth?
He had some other kind of weird thing, like he talked about sugar, and we should talk about good carbs versus bad carbs. Donuts are bad carbs. Fruit is good carb because of the fiber. But we can do a whole podcast on fruit alone. But he said, we don't get that much, and this is in this 800 calorie book, we don't get that much sugar, free sugar, added sugar. We don't just take a spoonful of sugar out of a sugar bowl and eat it. And I was like, but that's not where your added sugar comes from. The added sugar comes from coffee drinks that are full of sugar, and bread that's full of sugar, and pretzels that are full of sugar, and these are the donuts. This is where the added sugar comes in. And he just had some really weird ideas. But anyway,
it's interesting how. So he has a published book, or how did
he published a book on 5-2. Has a website on 5-2 called the 5-2 diet.
And he's dead?
He's dead now, yeah. But they wanted to make sure, just like Atkins wanted to make sure that it wasn't artery clogging that caused him to die. They want to make sure that he died of natural causes.
And at 60?
At 60, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
what does that mean?
It means that it wasn't fasting.
Yeah, shot.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't because of the
stabbed.
Yeah. Anyway, you got some things here for leanness for longevity. What does the article say about being lean?
Let me see here. Clinical trials of a low-calorie diet, calorie restriction, in other words,
right,
in healthy non-obese individuals. Researchers found that the intervention helped them dial down metabolic rates. Yeah.
Again, with the metabolic rates, but not telling what they are.
Yeah, but they're dialing them down. So we know that they're going down because of calorie restriction.
Yes.
Oh, geez, what problems could that cause in the long term when you go off the calorie restriction?
Well, a little bit. Well, you got
a short-term effect. Oh, they're claiming it's a short-term effect thought to signal longer-term benefits for lifespan.
This is what they want them to be. They want them to be confused about what they should do with their diet. Now, that is a good segue into the next part, which is the funding. And we can look at the actual study But when we look at the actual study, because you've highlighted some things there, when we look at the actual study, it helps to understand that this is funded by Calico Life Sciences. And if we look up the Calico Life Sciences webpage, we see that they are in drug development for age-related diseases. So they don't want you in caloric restriction. They don't want you in fasting. They want you to only do their drugs. They want to give you drugs, and they call them therapies for age-related diseases, because drugs have a bad name, but the drug development is right there. So once you understand that this is who is funding this, you can understand kind of what they're saying in the study and why they're saying it. And it's not just funding from the company. It's scientists who actually are employees of Calico Life Sciences, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these scientists, and there are only a couple that aren't. If you look at it, there may be 20 scientists here, but half of them work for this company. So what is this study going to find? It's going to find something that just does not make any sense health-wise. It makes sense if you take the drugs. Anyway, let's look at this study.
You mean that you might not be entirely unbiased?
It's definitely not unbiased. It's biased towards taking drugs. And they're actually telling us stuff that makes no sense to get us to take their drugs.
Okay. So something that I want to point out right away, we're moving to the study.
Yeah, we're moving to the study. Unless you have something else to say about the article.
Learn how to write? Well, I'm sorry. But I mean, the source material is so bad, Yeah. When you're writing an article like this, it'd be a good idea to bring in other sources.
It would.
And there is some attempt here at the end. This Daniel Beletsky guy, who studies aging at Columbia University, but he's giving kind of a bland.
It's a poor attempt.
It's a poor attempt at balancing the article.
Yeah.
If you can call it an attempt at all. I guess the thing I want to point out, and for me, this is a non-starter of a study, because when I teach young children how to design scientific experiments, and we're looking at controlling variables at the age of 9, this doesn't control all the variables. There is no clear independent variable to this study. The title of it is Dietary Restrictions Impact Health and Lifespan of Genetically Diverse Mice. It's the title right away is quite misleading, but anyway, it's found in Nature magazine. And so right at the top,
because I like language. I like language.
It's misleading.
Yeah, let's look at that. Dietary restriction. What does that mean?
That means calorie restriction. It means dieting, all that garbage that everybody's been doing for years that hasn't been working.
Yes, and what they are actually talking about with the 5 groups is 1 day intermittent fasting, 2 day intermittent fasting, 20% caloric restriction, 40% caloric restriction. So yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know how you would save that, as far as you have to know what dietary restriction means. And it's vast. I mean, it could be.
When I see I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Dietary restriction can include intermittent fasting, but it's not the image that comes to my mind right away, as you just noticed.
Exactly. I would agree with you that dietary restriction is calorie restriction, and that's why when we looked at the article, eating less is the first words, because dietary restriction, eating less.
That's right.
Yeah,
and that's in her interpretation of this article as well.
That's right.
It just triggers these responses, conditioned responses in us.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's for.
Mark.
Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. Yeah.
Let's take a look at, there are 5 groups of mice in this study.
Okay.
So we have one group that can just party on, eat whatever they want. They're on basically a SAD
Standard American diet.
Standard American diet for mice.
Yes. Yes.
And you were saying it's like the typical garbage, sugar and salt.
Sugar, salt, and oil. It's basically what the Americans eat.
Right.
On a daily basis. Yeah.
So those mice are plugging along. Then there's this other group I find very interesting where they're having they're having an actual 24-hour fast.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically 3 p.m. to 3 p.m. on Wednesday and Thursday. Yes.
Okay. So there are two groups actually doing intermittent fasting. And what the study says is they get to catch up with the first group that gets to eat whatever they want.
Ad libitum. Yeah.
Right.
They're on an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Right. That's my life. So,
but the IF mice have one 24-hour period where they have no food whatsoever.
Right.
But then the rest of the time they can eat whatever they want.
Right. And they actually catch up with the AL group.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But, pointing out again, they're not eating good food. So I feel sorry for the critters.
Yeah.
They're being fed junk. Then there are two more groups that are on calorie restriction. They're on calorie.
You skipped the 2-day.
Oh, yes. Well, there's one group that's on 24-hour, and then there's another that's on 48-hour.
That's 3 groups.
And they're not on actual calorie restriction. They just stop eating for one group stopping for a day, and another group is for 2 days.
Yes.
Okay. So now we've got a group that's calorie restricted and fasting. Which to me, we got a missing group here. How about the one that's just on calorie restriction?
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about why they are. I mean, they're labeled 20% calorie restricted. That's the 4th group, and then the 5th group is labeled 40% calorie restricted. But they actually do say in here. In the study, if you look at the first paragraph, about halfway down, they say mice on CR, calorie restriction, also experience prolonged periods of daily fasting, and the health benefits of CR can be optimized by feeding at a specific time on the day, suggesting that both caloric intake and timing of feeding contribute to physiological responses and lifespan extension. But they also...
Interesting, if we can pause. So
sure, go ahead.
We were talking about that earlier today. So the time that you eat is important, right?
Yes, and so how do they feed these? They give them 40% less than the other mice are eating, or 20% less, but they give it all at one time. And the mice are creatures that eat all the food as quickly as possible. So they are then, once they're done with the food, the rest of the day they're fasting. Plus, they give them on Friday, the scientists give them three times the amount of food.
Now that we're really muddying the waters here.
Yeah, so
really muddying.
Yeah, so they give them for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So by Saturday, what they explain in here is the 40% mice were done with their food by Sunday at 3. The 20% were done by Saturday at 3. So they fasted the rest of the time. So they're not only calorie restricted, but they're also being fasted. So
they're being fasted using 2 methods. Yes. I think is what.
Well, they're
because the mice are just going to chow down, eat all the food. And then they're on an intermittent fast.
Yes, exactly.
So they're on intermittent fasting, and they're
calorie restricted,
and calorie restriction, and doing 48-hour fasts.
2 dietary.
That's extreme.
Yes,
that is extreme.
Well, that's closer to what we do, because But anyway,
you told me to calm down.
Anyway, so there are several different kinds of dietary restrictions. So how can they say cutting calories by 40% yielded the longest longevity bump? It's not cutting calories. It's cutting calories and fasting, intermittent fasting and long-term, because a 48-hour fast is a long-term fast.
It's a pity because they come very close to a good study here.
Close.
Right. They come close, but not close enough. If they just had that group that was calorie restricted only, with no fasting, and also to do this study properly, you would need to be giving the mice that aren't doing fasting, they're just doing calorie restriction, you give them 100 calories at 2 o'clock, another 100 at 3 o'clock, to ensure that, they're not gorging themselves, which is normal for animals.
Yeah.
And then fasting, right? Doing intermittent fasting. That's a 1, 2, 3 combination. God, this should work, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
But it doesn't. There's some problems because of that reduction in metabolism.
Yes.
And increasing of fat that we all know about because we've dieted.
Yes, it's because this is a study done by a drug company that wants you to take their therapies for age-related diseases. They do not want you, actually, they don't mind you calorie restricting, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Because it doesn't work, right?
Because it doesn't work. We'll talk about that in a second.
So you can do
the intermittent fasting
term therapy. Yeah. You can do a therapy that involves calorie restriction because that doesn't work.
Well, you won't be on calorie restriction for very long. The study actually says that caloric restriction extends healthy lifespan in multiple species. This is the important part. Intermittent fasting, an alternative form of dietary restriction, is potentially more sustainable in humans. What they're saying is that fasting is better because you can continue it for longer periods of time.
Right.
You've been doing this for months, probably longer than any diet you ever tried. I've been doing this for 8 years, longer than any diet I ever tried. We'll actually talk about what are the problems with calorie restriction, and is intermittent fasting better than calorie restriction at some point.
It makes me want to pull out my hair again because of the use of language.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's this line, intermittent fasting, a positive phrase coming up.
Yeah.
An alternative form of dietary restriction. I don't like that. I know you think it's not the worst language they use here, but still,
alternative is a bad word. Well, an alternative is a bad word. I mean, if you are into alternative media, you're a conspiracy theorist. So yeah, alternative is definitely a bad word.
It used to be cool to be into alternative music. That included Pink Floyd and all kinds of cool music.
Oh, now they're mainstream.
Now alternative is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it's also the use of the word restriction, dietary restriction.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just makes it sound so negative, I guess. And I don't feel like I'm restricting my diet. Other than, the fast kind of controls a bit. Well, you're not going to eat garbage food.
Yeah, they call it food deprivation is what they call it. Whereas calorie restriction says you can eat whatever you want. You're just cutting back on calories. So if you want that one Big Mac a day, go ahead. But then you're going to be fasting. So Anyway, so the language is definitely not good for intermittent fasting. Definitely not good. I agree with you.
Yeah, but on the face of this, the next line is identifying the most efficacious forms of dietary restriction is key for developing interventions to improve human health and longevity. This all sounds really good to me.
Except for the developing interventions. Because the developing interventions is the therapies, it's the drugs. They are not interested, but what they're saying is identifying the best one is important for getting drugs. But what they really mean is finding out that calorie restriction is the best one, is the best for the drug company and worse for the patients because they're going to be taking the drugs. So, what the drug companies want you to believe is they want you to believe that genetics are more important to you losing weight and getting healthy than lifestyle changes.
My dad's fault.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Exactly.
All his fault, mom's fault too.
And there's nothing you can do about it if it's all genetic. So
natural selection that allowed me my ancestors to survive in the wild, in uncivilized Scotland and the glens of Scotland. It's all their fault.
Absolutely. It is not your fault. Yes. Yeah. So they're saying here that what they say is that for the mice that lived 6 months, the genetic background explains 23.6% of the variation in lifespan, 23%, whereas and then they say, well, diet explained only 7.4%.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, it's what most people want to believe. You're talking about Scotland, and I had a friend who was actually from. Actually, she is Scottish, but unfortunately she got cancer. And her idea was that the cancer was controlled 95% by genetics. It wasn't her fault. It's because she has cancer in the family, and that only 5% is controlled by diet. And I told her, I said, look, it's actually the other way around. It's 5% genetics and 95% environmental and diet and this kind of stuff. She just didn't want to hear that, because that would mean that she would have to make a change in her lifestyle. And so this is what doctors push, because if the doctor said that it's not genetics, it's actually diet and lifestyle, then you wouldn't need the doctor anymore. If you believe it's genetics and there's nothing you can do about it, then you'll take a drug therapy instead of changing your lifestyle. So that's really where I wanted to go with that. And isn't that what, look, before I wrote this book and before I started fasting, I believed the same thing, that it's genetics. And at one point, I actually thought, well, it actually could be food, because generally the kids eat the same food that the parents ate, and then when you become an adult, you ate the same food. And it's really, if you eat meatloaf and fried foods, then you're not going to be healthy, right? But I really didn't explore that very much. I just tried to eat as healthy as I could. But I found out since then that it's about lifestyle. Pretty much all of the chronic diseases that are out there right now can be taken care of with lifestyle changes. But this study does not want you to believe that.
I think this goes back to this argument of what is normal versus what is natural. And, what I was talking about, natural selection. So as far as what's normal, we shove food in, as a group, food into our faces nonstop. Like, that's the basic standard.
That's what's normal. Normal, yes.
But that's not what's natural. And what's natural is sometimes there won't be food around. That's right. Right? There just won't be any.
That's right. With hunter-gatherers, whether you're hunting or gathering, food scarcity is going to be a part of your life, because animals won't always be around to kill, and food won't always be around to scavenge. So we developed biologically and evolutionarily to deal with the food scarcity, and that's why we go through that metabolic switch from burning glucose, sugar, to burning fat. So we eat as much as we can for the sugar and that kind of stuff. It turns into fat, and then we use that store of energy when we don't have the food, when we're famine. And so we developed that way. And so now when we take in constant food source, constant sugar, we never go through that metabolic switch. We never benefit from that burning
contrary.
Yeah. So and so then we get fatter and fatter and fatter, and you're seeing that in North America. And I'm not on a soapbox. I was fat too. I weighed 200 or 100 kilograms. I weighed about 200 pounds for my frame. That's a lot. So I was a butterball turkey. Anyway, so in the discussion, they're really pushing that the calorie restriction works the best, and that it's because of your genes. So there's not much you can do. So this insight they talk about, and this is what the insight is, has important implications for the choice of biomarkers in human dietary intervention studies, which frequently focus on metabolic health. They're telling you, don't worry about metabolic health. That doesn't matter. And then they go on, and certain lifespan.
Is that the general consensus in the medical establishment?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Isn't there this thing called like metabolic syndrome? And unfortunately, unfortunately.
And what do they do? What do they do when part of metabolic syndrome is blood pressure? I'll tell you what the doctor told me the last time that I went to the doctor to get my stats taken.
Yeah.
But what do they do when you have high blood pressure or you have high blood sugar? What do they do?
So let me see. With high blood pressure, they give you medication.
Medication.
Right.
Every metabolic problem,
Yeah.
they give you medication. We're going to put you in the hospital. We're going to start you on medication.
High cholesterol.
High cholesterol. Yeah.
And then what's the other thing that you mentioned?
Obesity. They now they have that injectable Ozempic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was going to do the thing where you could only have a certain amount of food in your stomach at a time.
The bariatric surgery. Bariatric surgery.
So we looked into that,
Which comes into huge problems.
It's being sick for life.
Yeah, you have nutritional deficiencies. You can't eat as much.
Another issue with this surgery is that they're not looking at the source of the calories. So, okay, it might prevent you from eating steak, right?
The bariatric surgery?
Yes.
It does. Absolutely.
But, it's not going to stop you from drinking Coca-Cola. And if you're drinking Coca-Cola all day, you're going to be fat and unhealthy.
That's for sure. And
so it might even stimulate that. That'd be an interesting study to do. It's like, it would engage in calorie-seeking behavior. They go, oh, that's a good source of calories. Good old Coca-Cola. What could go wrong?
Yeah, they have to, because when you reduce the size of the stomach, you can't eat as much. So these people with bariatric surgery become nutrient deficient. So they can't get enough nutrition because they can't get enough food into their system. So obviously they would be hungry, which is one of the problems with it. And they would, because their body's continually saying, give me nutrition, but they can't.
Wow.
Get
it's
enough.
Like if you wanted to torture someone, that would be a great way. I wonder what I said to my doctor to make him so angry with me. Oh, well.
Oh, so he suggested bariatric?
He was saying, his mentality was, you're in metabolic collapse. Your goal is, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you make it to 65. And, he was, and I kept saying, well, can you test me for prostate cancer? And he goes, your goal is to die from prostate cancer. Because if you die from that, it means you haven't died from all these other things.
Well, that's an interesting way to run your medical practice.
Oh, I mean, his point was, mind your priorities.
Yeah.
But my dad did die at the age of 66.
From prostate cancer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would depend on your point of view. Did he die from the cancer or did he die from the treatment?
From the treatment, from the medication. And that's,
I don't know.
So and one of the things with prostate is lifestyle changes. It can be taken care of with lifestyle changes, but doctors are never going to say that to you. Going back to the original thing that you were saying, are doctors going to help you with this? Absolutely not. They are trained specifically to push drugs, not
and
to
operations
push
too.
Operations, absolutely.
Operations that after you're done with them, you'll need drugs.
Exactly. Medical intervention and not lifestyle changes. If
therapies, they're therapies.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, that's the model. It's the model for our modern medical. If you want to die, go to the hospital. If you want to stay alive, just change the way you're living. Just don't go to the hospital. You won't get sick. Anyway,
can I just
go ahead?
Going back to my dad, because I really connected with what Eric Clapton said. To sugar,
yes.
And he would make sugar sandwiches.
Oh.
My dad would make sugar sandwiches. Mm-hmm. I would make sugar sandwiches, but it's okay. They were brown sugar. That's all right.
Well, I made.
Is that all right? No.
They can be honey sandwiches for that matter, and it's still not. It's still sugar.
Loved honey.
Look. I made, because I wrote it in my book. I made sugar sandwiches also. Sugar and butter Is there anything better than sugar and
Of
butter?
course, you put butter on it. You put
Yeah.
butter on your bread. Come on.
Yeah. So,
You've got
and that's how I got my calories. But I was doing it because I was starving myself to make weight.
Right.
So I would go for 3 days without food. Then I would eat a lot before I wrestled. I'd wrestle on Saturday at the tournament. Then Sunday I could eat. I could eat all the way up until like Tuesday, Wednesday. So I would be looking at calorie seeking. I mean, it just like I wanted as many calories as I could.
I played defense, so I wanted in ice hockey. So I was constantly eating a lot of food. But because of bigger you are,
to bulk up. Wrestling's the opposite, but yeah. Anyway, so let's get back to this study because I think it's necessary to know how to read studies and know who's funding them, to know what they're trying to say. That they actually don't do a bad job of the ones who are not part of the company that's pushing drugs here.
It's so close to a good study.
They put stuff in there that allows you to know that there are some good scientists on this study, but the ones who are pushing drugs, they're not good. Anyway, so, and certain lifespan extending properties of DRC, dietary restriction, may in fact be detrimental to other aspects of physiological health. For example, although mice on 40% calorie restriction are healthy by most measures, we saw indications of adverse effects, including lifelong loss of lean mass, lower body temperature, food-seeking behavior, an indication of hunger, and changes in immune repertoire that could potentially confer susceptibility to infection. Well, actually, lower temperature is okay, and that happens with fasting, which they were fasting. The lean mass, the loss of lean mass, all you have to do is lift weights while you are fasting. Not necessarily while you're in a fast. You don't have to do it in the fasted state, but while you are fasting as a system of being healthy, lifting weights increases your muscle mass, so you don't overall lose muscle mass.
But that's it. You're conceding that that's a risk, but you need to have compensation for that risk.
And quite frankly, the loss, and notice they don't put how much here. They might in the study, but they don't put how much here. And the loss of mass is minuscule. It's not even, I mean, it's barely measurable, but there is that problem. The weightlifting is for the people who are so afraid of withering away to nothing that they don't fast. So in order to get them fasting, let's just say, okay, lift weights and you won't have anything to worry about. At any rate, this food-seeking behavior, an indication of hunger, actually when you fast a certain amount of time, the hunger goes away. Once you detoxify your body, the hunger goes away, and it's not that you're hungry. The food seeking is because you have gone without food for a little while and you need that nutrition.
So this is in effect attached to the 40% calorie restriction.
They're putting it into the 40% calorie restriction.
Right. So I mean, this isn't really a fair comment even on fasting.
No,
it's on fasting and calorie restriction.
Yeah, but
so
if you believe all this stuff that they're saying here, that the loss of lean mass, low body temperature, food-seeking behavior, because you're going to be hungry, which on CR, if you do CR, you are hungry. That's one of the biggest problems with CR. Lower immune system, then you're going to be like, okay, well, I don't want any of that to happen, so I'll just take those therapies. I'll take the drug. That's what this is all about. That's what this is all about.
Okay, lower body temperature. Why would they say that is an adverse effect?
Because people think that you have to have a hot, 98.6. What is it in Celsius? It's 37, 38, somewhere in there. So, but people are led to believe that if your temperature is low or high, you're sick. That's what they're led to believe.
It just means it's not normal.
Exactly. It's natural because when you're fasting, your body temperature does tend to.
And where did that number come from?
Yeah.
The thing is, we had a great opportunity during COVID to actually measure what is an average body temperature based on loads of data.
Yeah.
So why haven't the numbers changed? I mean, I think probably it's lower. Is probably natural than the average temperature.
It's definitely natural, and there's nothing to worry about. It's what does it have to do with? It has to do with the burning of calories to get energy, which is ATP, chemical energy. But your mitochondria burn the calories in the cells. Then it produces ATP, which is the chemical energy that we need. So, and that actually they found out, the mitochondria, they couple, right? So if they couple, you have efficient calorie burning. So you don't produce as much heat. If they're uncoupled, which goes with not being healthy, then you produce more heat to get that energy, and you get less energy. And for those of us,
actually a sign of ill health.
Yes,
it's a sign of good health to have lower temperature.
Now, when you live in the northern climes, like we're both from that area, we genetically have developed to have that uncoupling so that we can stay warmer during the winter. Anyway, let's go into what I want to talk about last is the fasting versus calorie restriction, because the question that most people pose, like this one did, which one's better for you, right? And it's universally accepted that calorie restriction diets don't work. They just don't work. Do you have something to say about?
No, carry on.
Okay. So they just don't work. But which one is better? To address this question, whether IF is in itself beneficial rather than merely reducing calorie intake, Mitchell and colleagues, this is a study that they did, compared lifespan and disease onset for ad libitum fed mice on CR fed several meals a day, and CR mice fed once a day, while keeping caloric intake similar to the mice fed multiple times a day. So the CR mice fed one time a day is basically intermittent fasting. Interestingly, the time spent fasting was directly related to the health and lifespan extension for all mice in that study, with the single meal fed mice living significantly longer and having delayed disease onset than the multiple meal fed mice. This would also explain why dietary dilution, a form of CR in which mice eat all day to compensate for the low energy in their food, does not lead to life expansion or lifespan extension. So if you give them lower nutrition, they can still eat all day, but they're not going to expand their life. So it's not about the lower amount of nutrition. In addition to lifespan extension and delayed disease onset, IF also leads to improved preservation of cognitive, sensory, and motor function in IF-fed rodents compared to CR-fed rodents. So this is the mice study, but they also did it in humans. In humans, people ate on average 23 to 35% less during alternate day fasting and periodic fasting, which is intermittent fasting. This is what you're doing. So this particular study compared early time restricted feeding, eating between 8 a.m. and 1400, with a non-fasting control group. Yeah, so they had, it's 16-8. It's basically what you're doing. It's just that it's breaking the fast at 8 instead of breaking the fast at noon. That's called late TR, time restricted feeding. Anyway, that's not part of this one. It's just the early time restricted feeding. So, and nutritional intake over the day, exactly the same for both groups. So the nutrition was the same. The researchers found that time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, in contrast to the control group, which was basically calorie restricted, led to an increase in the expression of several genes associated with autophagy. That's interesting. That's the cleaning out of your cells, right?
Increase in the expression of genes. So that suggests that you activate the genes
through fasting. Right. Absolutely.
You're always activating genes, right? It just depends which genes you're activating. And these, this is a positive.
Exactly. This is positive.
So you can go back to this study and go, okay, it's because of genetics. It's because you're activating particularly negative genes.
That's right.
That's right. And you can, and if you go this route and activate positive ones.
That's right. If you're eating constantly, you activate negative ones.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So then it's good for the circadian clock. I'm not going to go into that. Insulin sensitivity, which means insulin can go into your cells and do work. The sugar can do what it's supposed to do instead of blocking it from going into your cells because they're clogged. Anyway, furthermore, they found an increase in BNDF, which is brain-derived neurotropic something factor, and an increase in the expression of mTOR in the high restricted feeding group compared with the control group. Now, that mTOR is a very interesting thing because mTOR, when you eat, mTOR is up. And autophagy and insulin is down. Right. I'm sorry. Autophagy is down. And so when you are fasting, the breaking down of proteins goes down because mTOR goes down, and the autophagy goes up. So this works in this inverse fashion, and that's one of the reasons why ivermectin is good, because it helps you with that system, the mTOR system. Anyway, alternate day fasting trial also in humans, and they found that many lipids and free fatty acid levels were higher on the fasting versus non-fasting days. So these are good fats, whereas several amino acid levels were lower, including the amino acid methionine, for which lower levels are associated with longevity. So fasting helps with many metabolic systems that help with health and longevity. Hence, the mere act of fasting, irrespective of CR, calorie restriction, alters lipid metabolism, according to this study, and potentially due to the lipolysis in adipose tissues, fat tissues, and hepatic clearance of amino acids, which is through the liver. Hepatic is through the liver, of clearance of amino acids from circulation for gluconeogenesis. And that's really the ketone bodies, which your liver turns into sugar. So, I'm actually looking at the wrong side of my head. No, liver is on that side. So, gluconeogenesis is good, and you get that with the metabolic switch. Fasting, when you fast, you go from sugar burning to fat burning. So, not only is fasting easier because the hunger goes away, but it's also more beneficial than calorie restriction. So, and calorie restriction just doesn't work.
But how could it work? What is it? What are we trying to achieve with calorie restriction? And what would be the mechanisms that would allow it to achieve any of those goals? I can clearly see it with fasting. You're giving your body a break to do other things. It's to me, it's quite simple, Okay, now your body doesn't have to focus on digestion. It can focus on other things.
Absolutely.
Right. Calorie restriction. You're still working your digestive system without a break.
That's right. That's right. You never go into that fasted state. You never go into the fasted state, and this is why. Now, the reason that this study wants you to do CR is because it doesn't work. You won't stick with it. It's all about genes, so you have no say in it anyway. And so you'll take their drugs. And basically, the reason that calorie restriction is pushed so hard in the mainstream media is because pharmaceutical companies, they fund the mainstream media, so they want you to do calorie restriction because they know that it doesn't work.
So I shouldn't join Weight Watchers?
No.
Dear.
No.
I think it was 70s, 80s that they started pushing Weight Watchers.
Yes.
And then Weight Watchers made the problem worse.
Yes, absolutely.
So dieting made people even fatter still.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of us have been there where we've lost some weight and, And that's always our fault. It's always our fault. Their program fails.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Well, it's your fault. It's your fault.
I wish they could imagine if you sold cars on that basis. It's your fault. Yeah. Our brake system failed.
Yeah.
It's your fault that 80%, 90% of our vehicles. What is the success rate of Weight Watchers? I'd put it at maybe 3 to 5%.
I would say you're spot on.
Right. Just as a guess.
And they it's your fault that it doesn't work, and just eat less. That's all you have to do. You just eat less. Well, it actually doesn't work, and it's not healthy to just eat less. Eat less ultra-processed foods, like one Dorito, one potato chip. Well, the advertisement was you can't just eat one for potato chips in the United States anyway. Was that in Canada? You can't just eat one. That was the whole...
But they're so addictive.
They're so addictive. You can't eat just one. And guess what? You couldn't. I mean, I tried. I couldn't.
I don't eat them.
Okay, well, I don't now. But when I was fat, it was my fault that I was fat. I just had to eat less. And, so by doing that, they're keeping people fat. And that's what they want. That's actually...
It's a terrible cycle that people are in. And I hope this research on intermittent fasting and fasting helps people get out of that cycle, that we all are healthier and can enjoy our families longer. I'm hoping to beat my dad's record of 66.
Keep with the intermittent fasting. Actually, you are on the intermittent fasting. We're going to get you on the super fasting with the next long-term fast, which will come in December. So you have a chance to get ready for that. You will be ready. Intermittent fasting is sustainable.
We don't have to function at that level. We're human beings, and we can be in control of what goes into our mouths and when it goes in.
Absolutely. And not on calorie restriction, though.
Right. As long as we have the right data, the right plan that we're working from. And a lot of people for a long time have been working from the wrong plan.
They have been. So you're doing intermittent fasting. You'll get to the long-term fasting, which is super fasting. But also super fasting involves exercise, which you do. So you don't have to change it much based on that. Also, eating healthy, which you have started doing naturally. And so you're practically, you're going to be a super faster by December. No problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think this is a good time to call it a day.
Break fast and have something to eat.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
That would be good. All right. Well,
thanks for showing us, Mark.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing piece of propaganda.
It is, and that's what most studies are, as we will find out as we go along. Thank you for listening to the SuperFast Podcast, and we will be back next week.
Take it easy.
All right. Keep fasting. Thank you for listening to the SuperFast Podcast with M. David Peterson and Bruce MacGregor. We hope you enjoyed the discussion today. Be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe or follow button below. And feel free to leave a comment to let us know how we are doing, how you are feeling, or about your experiences with fasting. Learn more about superfasting and health by clicking the links in the description below, especially the link to Kobo.com to purchase the ebook SuperFast, Fasting for Super Health by yours truly, M. David Peterson. Remember, it is never too late to get healthy. Please understand that any advice or recommendations that we make in this podcast are not to be construed as medical counsel. We speak from personal experience and research. The recommendations that we make here are based on our involvement in and understanding of this lifestyle. The suggestions herein are the same that we might make to a friend, with the assumption that that friend would not just take our word for it. As a listener, you should do your own research to determine if this lifestyle is in your best interest. We hope that you find this podcast entertaining as well as informative. However, any lifestyle or diet or fasting change should be done with the supervision of a qualified medical professional, preferably one knowledgeable in therapeutic fasting. And please, do not stop taking or reduce any medication without consulting your physician. Join us next week for another SuperFast podcast. Until then, keep super fasting and stay healthy, my friend.